The Dominion fleet drifted above the dying colony like vultures circling a carcass. Beneath them, the human settlement burned, its defensive turrets silenced in minutes, its population herded toward transport barges with clinical precision. Admiral Kareth reclined in his command throne, watching the devastation with the half-lidded gaze of one long accustomed to victory. The hum of machinery filled the silence, punctuated only by the occasional plea broadcast from the colony surface. He muted those channels after a few moments. "They beg in every tongue," Kareth murmured to his second-in-command. His voice carried a lazy humor, a predator mocking its prey. Different accents, different prayers, but all the same at their core. Isn't that curious? Centuries scattered in the stars, and still they plead like animals at slaughter. His second, Captain Vera, inclined her head, though her eyes flickered toward the tactical displays. "They're beneath us, Admiral. It hardly matters what they sound like." "Beneath us," Kareth echoed, savoring the words. He raised a clawed hand and traced the glowing outlines of the star system. Scattered embers. Always burning out. "I almost missed the challenge they once promised." His tone hardened briefly before softening again into amusement. "Almost." The colony's governor was dragged before the admiral via holographic projection, face bruised, dignity shredded. He spat defiance anyway, cursing the Dominion for its cruelty. Kareth tilted his head, listening as one might endure a badly tuned instrument. "You confuse stubbornness with strength," Kareth replied at last, his voice carrying the weight of boredom more than anger. He gestured, and the transmission ended. "Execute the remainder. Keep only those young enough for labor. We don't waste resources on the useless." Below, the screams rose as Dominion troops carried out the command. Above, in the Admiral's chamber, silence returned. Reports came in from other sectors, more human enclaves fallen, more easy victories. It was routine, as ordinary as breathing. Yet Vera hesitated as she approached with the next data pad. "There is one more," she said. "An uncharted world flagged in the archives. The humans call it Earth." The word lingered in the chamber. Kareth raised an eyebrow. "Earth." He let the syllable roll on his tongue. "Their myth world. The birthplace." He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "A planet of ruins, long abandoned. Why trouble me with legend?" "The archivists say its coordinates are authentic," Vera pressed. "We intercepted human transmissions naming its sacred ground. Perhaps resources remain. Artifacts. Relics. Worth study." "Relics," Kareth repeated, leaning back. He allowed himself a smile, the kind that carried both cruelty and curiosity. "Imagine the irony, taking their cradle as our trophy. A fitting end to a species clinging to memory." He gestured with a flourish. "Set course." The fleet tore through the void, slipping between folds of warped space. Days bled into hours within the jump corridors, until at last the pale blue sphere appeared on their displays. Earth. To Kareth, it looked fragile, a faded marble adrift in black eternity. "Pathetic," he muttered. "A world already dead, still orbiting out of habit." The landing parties swept down with no resistance. What they found was not ruins choked with time, but something stranger. The cities were too intact, their collapse too precise, as though decay had been curated, staged for effect. Streets lay empty, yet every structure was cleared of debris. No wild growth, no chaotic ruin. Silence reigned, ordered and deliberate. Kareth frowned at the feeds. This is no graveyard. This is theater. On the surface, soldiers discovered an ancient satellite still orbiting, broadcasting a weak but steady signal. When retrieved, it began transmitting on all frequencies simultaneously. A calm voice, synthesized yet unmistakably human, filled every Dominion vessel at once. "Cease hostilities. You are observed." The words were simple, almost polite. For a moment, silence hung over the command deck. Then laughter burst from several officers, sharp and derisive. "A bluff," one muttered. "An automated warning," another added. "Centuries old. Harmless." Kareth allowed himself a smirk. Observed? By ghosts? By dust? Let them watch. He crushed the data pad in his grip, shards falling like broken glass. Destroy the relic. Burn this planet's hollow memory. Show the humans even their birthplace cannot shield them. The order was carried out swiftly. Orbital bombardments seared the surface. Towers crumbled, oceans boiled, monuments shattered. The satellite was incinerated in a single, contemptuous strike. The fleet unleashed its fury, as though erasing history itself. But as the fire spread, the space around Earth shimmered. Ripples of distortion flared, like cracks in glass. One by one, Dominion ships reported system failures. Navigation arrays flickered. Wormhole signatures registered across the void, dozens, then hundreds, too precise to be natural. "Admiral," Vera said tightly, her earlier composure gone. "We are detecting something. Gates forming. From nowhere." Kareth narrowed his eyes, his smugness faltering for the first time. Impossible. No one else possesses that capacity. Yet the displays did not lie. Unmanned vessels emerged from the rifts, human in design, but sleek, unfamiliar, their movements unervingly efficient. They made no hails, no demands. They simply attacked, cutting down Dominion escorts with surgical strikes. Kareth watched, his jaw tightening, though his tone remained sharp with arrogance. A desperate trick. Machines do not win wars. End them. But deep within his chest, an unease coiled, a whisper he refused to acknowledge. For the first time in centuries of conquest, he felt the faintest edge of uncertainty, as though the shadows of history were stirring, and the prey he had mocked might not have been sleeping at all. He sat back, gaze fixed on the blue planet below, now wreathed in fire. "Observed," he muttered to himself, the word tasting different now. "By whom?" The fleet pressed forward, but Kareth's thoughts no longer flowed as smoothly as before. Something had shifted, something he did not yet understand. And though he crushed the feeling beneath layers of pride, the seed of doubt had been planted. The shadowed message stretched outward beyond Earth, beyond the fleet, threading through the cosmos. Its warning was not for him alone. It was for all who would listen, or fail to. The wreckage of Dominion cruisers still drifted near Earth's orbit, glowing fragments tumbling silently through space. Admiral Kareth stood rigid on his command deck, his claws digging into the armrests of his throne. He had expected a simple raid, a spectacle of destruction to be added to his long list of conquests. Instead, he found himself staring at something he could not classify. Human craft, unmanned, precise, and unnervingly deliberate. They did not fight for survival or vengeance. They fought like machines programmed for inevitability. "Status of the fleet," he demanded, his tone more clipped than usual. Captain Vera's eyes avoided his. 7 escorts lost, Admiral. Another 9 disabled. No survivors recovered. The attackers vanished back into the rifts before we could retaliate. Kareth's gaze narrowed. They appear, strike, and vanish. No challenge, no message. What game is this? Vera hesitated before speaking. Perhaps not a game. Perhaps a test. The words unsettled him, though he dismissed them with a sharp gesture. Tests are for students. We are conquerors. Do not confuse the roles. Still, unease gnawed at him. The humans had been weak, divided, desperate. Every archive described them as relics of a past age, a species scattered and fading. Yet the precision of these new attacks suggested calculation, patience, even foreknowledge. That was not desperation. That was something far older and far more dangerous. A transmission pierced the comms, no grand display, just a single channel, spoken in flawless Dominion standard. The voice was calm, neither male nor female, stripped of inflection. "You were warned. This is not aggression. This is containment." The bridge fell silent. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, the usual mockery absent from their faces. Kareth forced a dry laugh. Containment? From ghosts? A trick of programming. Nothing more. But in the privacy of his mind, he wondered who, or what, had chosen those words. Containment was not the language of prey. It was the language of a jailer. The council summoned him days later, demanding an explanation for the embarrassing losses. The chamber glittered with crystalline walls and radiant banners, but Kareth noticed how the voices around him cracked with fear beneath the bluster. The overseer, a towering figure draped in silver armor, fixed him with unblinking eyes. "Admiral, rumors spread. The humans, once thought extinguished, resist us with weapons unknown. You were tasked to burn their cradle. Why then do I hear whispers of Dominion vessels destroyed by shadows?" Kareth straightened. "Because shadows struck us, overseer. But they are not phantoms. They are machines, human machines, prepared and hidden. Their colonies were bait. Their weakness, deception. This was no ruin we stumbled upon. It was a snare." Laughter rippled through the chamber. One counselor sneered, "So the mighty Kareth blames his losses on peasants in rusting ships." Another chimed in, machines do not frighten us. Smash them, and the species is finished. Kareth clenched his jaw, but forced restraint into his reply. If you saw their movements, you would not mock so loudly. They fought as though they had studied us, studied everyone for generations. They did not hesitate. They did not err. They struck as though the outcome was already known. The overseer's eyes flickered. And what do you suggest? That humanity planned this war for eons, waiting for our arrogance. The silence that followed was answer enough. Dismissed from the chamber, Kareth lingered in the archives alone. He accessed the restricted records of human history, material dismissed as irrelevant. What he found unsettled him more than the machines themselves. Wars spanning continents. Cities annihilated in firestorms of their own making. Weapons of terror unleashed not upon enemies, but upon themselves. Every century, another cataclysm. Every generation, another crucible of blood. He stared at the footage, at the mushrooming clouds of ancient nuclear blasts, at the trenches filled with mud and corpses, at the relentless march of tanks through shattered cities. The humans did not simply fight wars. They lived inside them, perfected them, survived them. And they had done so long before any Dominion ship darkened their skies. Kareth whispered to the empty chamber, you prepared yourselves by destroying yourselves. And now you prepare for us. A chill ran through him, though the air was warm. For the first time in his long career, he felt the stirrings of something he despised in others, fear. His reflection was interrupted by another transmission, this one private, routed directly to his vessel. The same calm voice filled his chamber. You still do not understand. We are not returning. We were never gone. You awakened what you mistook for ruins. The Watchers have always been here. Kareth's pulse quickened. Identify yourself. No reply came, only silence. The transmission ended as suddenly as it had begun. Vera found him later, her expression tight. The council mocks you, Admiral, but the officers whisper otherwise. Some believe. Some are frightened. They ask, what if humanity is no longer human? He met her gaze, seeing in her eyes the same tremor he tried to bury in himself. Then we must learn what they have become, he said softly, before it learns too much of us. Outside the viewport, Earth glowed faintly, scarred but defiant. The planet felt less like a trophy and more like a mirror, one he could no longer bear to look into without unease. The Dominion fleet regrouped, preparing new strategies, but Kareth carried with him the images of human wars, burned into his mind like scars. He had seen species rise and fall, empires crushed, rebels extinguished. None had ever disturbed him as much as the thought that perhaps, after all their violence, humanity had learned to make war into something else entirely, something patient, mathematical, inevitable. And as his ships departed the system, the phrase from the transmission echoed in his mind with unbearable clarity. Not aggression. Containment. It did not feel like a warning anymore. It felt like a promise. The council chamber was filled with noise, but none of it was certainty. Holographic banners shimmered across the high walls, voices overlapped in heated argument, and yet not a single Dominion leader seemed to know how to name what they faced. Some shouted for an immediate campaign to scour every human enclave from the stars. Others laughed the entire matter away, dismissing the recent defeats as anomalies, as bad luck wrapped in superstition. Admiral Kareth stood silent among them, the stillness of his frame more unsettling than any raised voice. They are insects, one minister barked, his jeweled mantle glittering under the chamber lights. A scattered people clinging to myths. The Admiral has allowed embarrassment to inflate into phantoms. Crush the remnants, and this paranoia ends. Another voice countered, sharp with unease. Insects do not build wormhole gates. Insects do not erase fleets without speaking a word. If they are insects, then we are prey in their web. The overseer silenced the chamber with a gesture, his steel-clad arm raised high. Enough. We will not allow human whispers to fracture Dominion resolve. Admiral Kareth, you will speak plainly. What did you see? Kareth's eyes lingered on each of them before he replied. I saw precision. Ships unmanned yet flawless. Strikes executed as though our movements had been rehearsed 1,000 times. I saw not rage, not desperation, but inevitability. They fight as if they have already calculated the outcome, and we are too late to change it. A murmur rippled across the chamber, but the overseer dismissed it with a scoff. Calculated inevitability. You ascribe myth to machines. Kareth's jaw tightened. You did not watch them. I did. His voice dropped lower, almost reluctant. They frightened me. That admission sent silence flooding the chamber. For a Dominion admiral, fear was not an emotion to confess, let alone display. Kareth let the silence hang, daring them to name it weakness. No one did. The council broke without resolution, and Kareth returned to his flagship with a storm gathering behind his eyes. Captain Vera waited for him at the viewport, her expression grim. They won't listen, she said simply. They never do until it's too late, Kareth muttered. His claws tapped against the railing. But I know what I felt, and I will not ignore it. Moments later, alarms rang across the fleet. New wormhole signatures scattered across the periphery. Kareth strode to the command throne, barking orders before the officers could even confirm. Shields to full. Ready counterfire. They will not catch us unprepared again. But when the human craft emerged, they did not attack head-on. Instead, they scattered into dozens of vectors, vanishing into the Dominion's supply lanes. Reports flooded in from across the sector. Fuel depots sabotaged, communication relays severed, patrol groups annihilated before calling for aid. This isn't war, Vera whispered, staring at the tactical board as red markers bloomed like spreading fire. It's dissection. Kareth's throat tightened. She had named it perfectly. Every move the humans made seemed designed not for victory in a single battle, but for collapse across an entire empire. Deploy pursuit squadrons, he ordered, though the command felt hollow. Chasing shadows across a collapsing network was folly, but he could not sit idle while the Dominion unraveled. Hours bled into days, and the reports grew darker. Fleets dispatched to intercept found only empty space. Colonies went silent one by one, not conquered, simply switched off, their systems dead, their defenses unresponsive. Human drones slipped through defenses like water through a sieve, leaving ruin, but never explanation. In the privacy of his quarters, Kareth reviewed intercepted human footage again. He watched ancient soldiers storm ruined cities, their faces smeared with blood and ash. He watched mushroom clouds rise over their own lands, detonated by their own hands. He watched cities reduced to rubble, yet rebuilt again and again, as though destruction itself was part of their rhythm. He spoke aloud, as though the ghosts in the recordings might answer. You burn yourselves to learn how not to burn again. And now you burn us. Sleep eluded him. When he closed his eyes, he saw fire over Earth, only now he understood it had not been a grave. It had been a test. He was beginning to believe the humans had passed it long before he was born. Another transmission arrived, this time unencrypted, broadcast openly across Dominion space. The same calm voice, cold and resolute. This is not conquest. This is conclusion. The Dominion has been weighed and found unworthy. Surrender is accepted. Resistance will be contained. The word spread like a contagion. Entire garrisons surrendered without a fight, terrified not of destruction, but of what lay behind the voice. Fear of annihilation was familiar. This was something worse, fear of inevitability. On the bridge of his flagship, Kareth stood among officers whose eyes betrayed cracks of doubt. He addressed them with measured gravity. If you surrender, you live as cattle. If you resist, you may die. That is the choice our enemies want us to see. But I tell you, there is another. We must understand them. We must know how they became this inevitability. Vera met his gaze, unflinching. And if there is no understanding, then there's only survival, Kareth replied. And I intend to survive. The tactical alarms flared again, louder, harsher. A massive wormhole tore open near the capital system, dwarfing any seen before. From its maw-poured human fleets, not hundreds but thousands, moving in formation like a single organism. They did not broadcast demands. They did not boast. They simply advanced, every vector precise, every strike preordained. Kareth gripped the command throne as the first wave tore into Dominion defenses. Stations fell in minutes. Warships were gutted with surgical beams before their weapons finished charging. The capital's skies burned, yet there was no chaos in the human assault, only rhythm. His officers shouted for orders, their fear spilling over, but Kareth gave none. He could not. His eyes fixed on the human vessels moving with dreadful elegance, and for a heartbeat he felt the future crystallize around him. The Dominion would fall. That much was certain. What remained uncertain was whether he would fall with it, or find a way to step into whatever came after. And for the first time in his long, proud career, Admiral Kareth found himself whispering not a command, not a boast, but a single, fragile question. Why did we ever wake them? The Dominion's capital system was no longer a fortress, but a graveyard. Its once proud fleets hung broken in orbit, gutted hulls drifting like carcasses picked clean. Stations that had pulsed with authority were dark, silent husks. On the flagship, Admiral Kareth watched his empire unravel in real time. Every transmission that reached him carried the same grim refrain: surrender, not resistance. Entire worlds capitulated before a single shot was fired, their leaders bowing to inevitability rather than waste lives. Fear had spread faster than any weapon. It was not the firepower of humanity that destroyed the Dominion, but the certainty that humanity had already won. Captain Vera stood beside him, her composure cracked but not shattered. She no longer asked if this war could be won. That question had burned away with the first waves of human fleets. Now she asked the only one left: what becomes of us? Kareth did not answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the tactical displays, on the patterns of human vessels carving through space with machine-like poise. They fought without excess, without spectacle. Where the Dominion would have announced triumph in thunderous declarations, the humans moved in silence, as if war were nothing more than administration. Every strike was a signature on a ledger, every destroyed ship another line in an equation. At last he spoke, voice lower than before, stripped of pride. We become whatever they decide. That is the truth we have earned. The words tasted like ash, but he knew them to be honest. A signal broke across every frequency, clear and unyielding. The same voice that had haunted them since Earth. The Dominion has collapsed. Further resistance will serve no purpose. Those who surrender will be governed. Those who resist will be contained. The bridge crew fell into silence. Some officers looked relieved, as though the burden of decision had been lifted. Others stared with quiet horror, knowing they were living through the moment their empire was stripped away not by battle, but by inevitability. Kareth closed his eyes for a brief moment. He remembered every conquest he had commanded, every colony burned, every species bent to Dominion will. He remembered the laughter with which he had once dismissed the humans, the contempt he had held when their pleas reached his ears. Now, standing in the ruins of his power, he understood the cost of arrogance. The wormhole gates expanded across the system, and human vessels poured through in ranks too precise to be chance. They did not linger to bask in victory. They dismantled orbital weapons, disabled defenses, and withdrew as though their presence was a formality. No cheering, no banners, no triumph. Just the clinical execution of a task long prepared. Kareth watched them vanish back into the folds of space, leaving only the Dominion crippled and hollow. His crew shifted uneasily, waiting for him to rage or collapse. Instead, he rose slowly from his throne. "They do not conquer," he murmured. "They govern. We are not enemies to them. We are a problem to be managed." The realization chilled him more than any defeat. To be conquered was to be hated, but to be managed was to be irrelevant. Days later, in the ruins of the Overseer's palace, Kareth was summoned not by his own leaders. Most had fled or taken their own lives, but by the humans. He entered a chamber stripped of grandeur, its shattered pillars left as reminders of what had been. A human figure awaited him, not flesh and blood, but a projection of a commander whose name he never learned. Their eyes held no malice, no triumph, only the calm certainty that had carried through every message. "You are Admiral Kareth," the figure said. It was not a question. "I was," Kareth replied. "Now I am a relic of a fallen empire." The human inclined their heads slightly. "Relics can still serve purpose. You will not be executed. You will serve as governor to your people, under our oversight. We require order, not ruin." Kareth stared at the figure, unable to mask his disbelief. "You strip us of everything, and then offer me stewardship? Why? Why not end us entirely?" The human's voice remained level. "Because you are not our enemy. You are a danger that needed to be contained. Now you are contained. That is enough." The word struck harder than any blade. He had expected chains, humiliation, perhaps even execution. Instead, he was given a role, not out of mercy, but because humanity did not consider vengeance worth their effort. His survival was not a gift. It was efficiency. When the projection faded, Kareth stood alone in the ruined chamber. He felt no triumph, no gratitude. Only the crushing weight of irrelevance and the faint ember of resolve. If he must serve under them, he would learn from them. He would understand what made them inevitable. Perhaps, in that understanding, his people might one day reclaim dignity. Outside, Dominion citizens filled the streets, not rioting, but watching in stunned silence as human drones dismantled weapons and departed. No banners of occupation were raised. No soldiers paraded in victory. Humanity had no need to remind the galaxy of their dominance. Their very restraint was dominance. Kareth moved through the crowds, their whispers following him. Some cursed his failure, others begged for his protection. He offered them no promises, only the same truth he carried in his own heart. They lived now at humanity's discretion. Later, aboard his quiet flagship, he stood again at the viewport. The stars stretched infinite, but they no longer felt lawless. Somewhere among them, humans watched. They had always watched. He understood that now. Vera joined him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think they will stop here?" Kareth shook his head slowly. "No, this was never about us. We were only the beginning. They woke for a reason, and now they are awake." For a long time neither spoke. The silence was heavier than any battle's aftermath. Then, almost to himself, Kareth whispered, "The galaxy does not yet understand. But it will. We thought we were predators. We were only noise. Now order is coming." His words lingered in the still air as the fleet lights dimmed. He did not know whether they were prophecy or resignation, only that they were true. And beyond the shattered capital, across the dark expanse, humanity stretched its shadow wider, not as conquerors, not as liberators, but as something far more permanent. They had no need for glory. They had no need for rage. They needed only inevitability. The stars would never feel the same again.